welcome to today's episode of Future Hospitality. I'm Dustin Myers, joined by co-host Jeremy Wells. We're partners at Longitude, a hospitality branding and design group. Today is our first episode in video format, and we're excited to begin this chapter of the podcast and hope that it makes it easier to connect with the guests. So today we're excited to welcome our friend, Mr. Rob Vogel.
Hey,
welcome
guys.
to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had the privilege to work together on a few projects ongoing, and we learned a lot from you off camera. So we thought it'd be really fun to just get together and talk through some of your professional journey and some of the lessons you've learned, particularly around the boutique world and kind of operations in creating unique experiences at scale.
Yeah, it's been a fun relationship that we've developed over the course of time, and obviously I think I joked with you, Jeremy, and Dustin. I think I was like, before I got involved, it's like, why do I keep learning about this hotel in the Ozark? It's all over my socials, and then a year later or so, we're sitting at a table with each other talking. So it's cool to see kind of things come full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool.
Maybe just share a little bit about your journey, how you got started in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably very similar to a lot of people, which is kind of falling into it. I started out working in restaurants in high school and into college to pay bills and, at that flexible schedule. And I really liked it. And it was also really fun atmosphere versus I tried working in retail and lasted like about a week. I do still know how to fold shirts though. But that's all I took from it. But I went to I was living in Florida for college, and obviously tourism and hospitality is a huge part of the economy down there. So I was working at a restaurant and wanted to go apply for this new restaurant just opened in this cool hotel, the W in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a really cool restaurant right on the water. So I went and applied, and this very crafty HR person was like, "What about you ever think about working in the hotel side, at the front office?" And I was like, sure, why not? Again, I was 19 at the time and, open to really anything like that. And it kind of just started from there. I never really looked back. There was moments where I was in school for marketing, but I quickly realized that I really loved every day being so unique and different. Eventually my life took me to New York, which is really where I got into the boutique space. And this is about 2012 when, there were so many amazing boutique products in the city. And it just really was an inspiring time to be like, well, I don't know if I ever want to go back to a larger group. There's all these really cool, unique things happening. And, here I am today. That was, wow, 20 years ago at this point.
That's awesome. You kind of left your story off there in New York. Like, what happened between New York and now, and what was that jump like from, maybe like a chain or like a more, less boutique experience, jump out of the boutique and independent and kind of lifestyle space to that transition?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's actually, I went, and so I was from W, and this is during the Starwood days when it was still owned by Starwood, and tons of, support. It was a much bigger hotel. And then you had, again, a big regional team in that area. And then I moved up and I started working at Gramercy Park Hotel, which was after Ian Schrager re-envisioned it with Julian Schnabel doing the design. And I think he had left. This is right after the recession, so he had left the picture, but was basically the hotel was running on its own as its own boutique. And it was like trial by fire. I was exposed to so many things. I came on as an assistant front office manager. And, you have, at that time, there was the nightclub Rose Bar there, which was like the spot in town. It was famous for turning Paris Hilton away, but also famously would be turning hotel guests away that would come shout at me for not getting into the club. But, to just the different, guests that would come through the door and people in the neighborhood. This is, Gramercy Park is a very unique area. It's the only private park in the city. So you have to have a key to actually be able to, or you have to live on the park visually to, in order to have a key to go into the park. And there's very strict rules with that. So we had all sorts of like really like, because it was this bit of a hidden gem in a way, really well-known people to, folks that were just kind of travel junkies or like design junkies and was really into the boutique space. And so that, I was there for a couple of years and again, just learned so much. Eventually they formed a management development program. So I got to get my feet wet in revenue management for a while and housekeeping, which was like the two to me the most. I was like, okay, this is where I want to kind of be able to plant my flag as like, I know rooms operations from the point of getting someone to book all the way through to making sure that the room is clean and ready to go to departure. And so I kind of, went back and forth very intentionally in revenue management and rooms ops over the course of the next 6 years because I wanted to continue to kind of work those muscles. And so, I then moved over to Ferndale Hotels, which at that time was Crosby Street Hotel, which now they have 3 properties in New York, but at the time, the first one outside of London. And that was an incredible experience. If you're familiar with Ferndale, they really create a culture there where you're, in the city, everybody knew about Crosby as like, you're going to work really hard, but you're going to learn so much and you're going to work with probably some of the best people you'll ever work with in the industry. And I remember my first morning stand up there and I was just like, okay, I can learn from every single person in this room, and everyone in their role takes this very seriously, doesn't take themselves seriously, but they take the role seriously. And that had really helped kind of like form those future me along that path of like what kind of leader I want to be, what kind of culture I want to create and help nurture, because that was truly, I spent 5 years with them. I opened their hotel, the Whitby in Midtown, and kind of helped take the culture of Crosby and try to bring that to Midtown, realize what didn't work even in, different markets, as Midtown and downtown Manhattan are so different, and we didn't really fully grasp that until we got there and we're like, we have to tweak, that was my first moment of like, okay, these looked slightly differently. They feel like they're their own, they have their own name, but we can't just totally plug and play the same framework and experience that we had downtown to Midtown. And that was like that first kind of click in my head. So, that was a great experience. And, I eventually wanted to kind of go back to more approachable hospitality as far as price point. Ferndale, the average starting rate was north of $700. And I kind of yearned for my time when I was with the W, because that felt like you were hosting your friends. It felt a little bit more just like they were curious, you were curious on what they wanted to do. And it wasn't so, I don't know, it felt like we were providing hospitality to the masses a little bit more. So, I ended up talking with Brad Wilson of Ace Hotels just by an introduction. He had said to me, he was like, how would you bring luxury into a hotel that has kiosks? And at the time, I was still working with Ferndale, and I was like, I joke with people, I say, I was like clutching my pearls coming from, again, like being in the luxury space. I was like, a kiosk. I was like, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And he just like planted that seed in my head. And we, didn't talk for, had a great conversation with him about a lot of other things. Yeah, but we didn't talk again for another like 6 months. But like, I remember at work thinking, I was like, how would I do that? And I just kept on thinking about it I couldn't get out of my head, because I was like, what is it? And that was the moment where I was like, being able to say to myself, what am I doing every day, or what's my team doing every day that doesn't cost a lot of money or doesn't need to cost a lot of money to have that same feeling in someone's heart or that moment of connection. And, Brad called me back up couple months after that, I think 6 months later, and hey, we're doing this project called Sister City. It's going to be like kind of a micro hotel brand. We're going to use kiosks. It's going to be this really unique experience on Bowery. And by that point, I'd been thinking about it for literally 6 months, and I was like, let's go, I'm in. And so I came on as their hotel manager, and I'm employee number 1. construction delays and all that, our kind of pre-opening office was at Atelier Ace, the corporate office, and I really was able to just just listen to the doors all being open, hear the design team how they are thinking about something, and it could have been a totally different project, but just like interesting, or hearing Brad on a call and what he's asking and thinking about, to the development person coming by and saying, hey, would you look at this like formula, just like real quick, does this seem like, does this make sense to you in that market? And it was just a kind of really great experience. And so we were able to take that time there, and also take the brand book that had been created and turn that into something that was physical, turn it into the actual hotel experience. And that was like just probably one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, to say, like, we took this literally a esoteric idea and turned it into, like, okay, how does the check-in experience now work? How does a housekeeper function in this space? How does, all these things, and you're doing it within a place that had a really strong culture of its own, with, Ace being Ace. And this was very much supposed to be the little sister. It was the sister city was the idea. So it was like this really fun challenge to say, okay, what part of the DNA do we want to pull out of the Ace DNA, and what do we want to make as its own for Sister City? And it ended up being really focused a lot around just engagement, because again, the kiosks scenario, when that came to life, we were like, well, I thought about my time as a front desk agent, and I would always be like, waiting to see my name on TripAdvisor reviews, or get hopefully maybe get a tip or something like that. And I was like, man, I'm never getting any of the tips. And the bellman that's doing like half the stuff and is just a great schmoozer, and is going to tell a guy or a woman how to make a left or a right to the subway, is cleaning up, and they're getting all on their name on TripAdvisor, or and so that was one example. And then the other side of it was the concierge, which fit more fair. Like, I'm not hating on the bellman at all, but the concierge, locking them in with like great reservations or recommendations. And I was like, well, what is like the connection? How do we, if I don't need to be worrying about like what is basically processing somebody through a system check-in, because they're doing it all themselves, what kind of person should be there to greet them? And I was like, can I mash together that bellman personality and that concierge know of what's really fascinating and interesting, and make that what the we call it, I think it was a guest services manager, agent. And it was, and then that helped us form who we wanted to bring on, because we knew that we had one, maybe two touch points with the guests, because once they make their keys, they never have to come by that front desk ever again. So how do we just like hit them with like so much excitement that they're there, and meeting them also where they're at? Are they actually exhausted and they just got off a really long flight and they just want to go crash? Like, okay, let's maybe take a different approach with them. So a lot of like super high EQ folks that we brought in, and we had a really great team, did really well from the operational and guest experience. And then COVID happened. So that shut everything down, and everything ground to a halt in our industry. And obviously, I think shifted so much of what we look at today as through the pre and post COVID for so many people in so many different facets of life. But like, I think particularly in hospitality, we think about it a lot, because it changed everything and kind of reset the play, having to rewrite the playbook and figure out what does this world look like from a staffing perspective, and from a guest perspective, what are they going to be looking for as we came out of the pandemic. And that kind of led me eventually to Bunkhouse Hotels in 2021. And joining their team down in Austin, Texas, running originally it was Hotel San Jose and Austin Hotel, and then we picked up the Carpenter Hotel, which is just another block away.
Incredible. It seemed to me like, and fascinating how you touched pretty much every single facet of hospitality, development, operations, marketing. And so I think you bring so much, experience, but also just perspective that I think are valuable, especially as you, have come into your new role here at Arbus. We'll get into how did all of that you described, prepare you for what your Arbus and what you guys are doing, that kind of defining, next steps for Arbus, as well as you guys are building it out and envisioning what the future looks like.
Yeah, thank you. I think that that's a great question. I think that For me, it's been a kind of a culmination of all these things. It's interesting how life takes you on a path, and when you're younger, perhaps think, okay, this is what will be the next logical thing. And it's, letting kind of the chips fall and see what happens in some cases. And, that's around the time, with, I had been with Bunkhouse for about four years at that point, and, started talking to Eric and Steven, the founders of Arbus and Eagle Point Hotel Partners. And we started talking about what they were trying to build. And I was like, this is really fascinating to me because there's a there there's only a handful of, I think, boutique groups really left that are trying to ensure that they're creating something hyper authentic. And I think the part that I resonate with is I really love brand. I love that part of the business of understanding and appreciating what is really, to me, is the foundation of what is going to drive the experience afterwards. Because it's going to define who the guest is going to be and define what kind of employee wants to come work for you. If you're a Ritz Carlton or something very high end, you're going to get a certain type of guest and a certain type of person that wants to come work there. Something that's a little bit more funky, a little bit more unique, you're going to get that funky and unique guest and employee. And those all, there's the pluses and minuses to all those things. And so, that was the excitement of working with Stephen and Eric, was they had all they had these really unique properties that are hyper distinct in their own ways. And trying to help figure a way of connecting them the right way that doesn't feel inauthentic, or, where kind of you're wiping the slate clean of what has been there to put this stamp of, Arbus on top of it, as we've talked internally and continue to tweak and figure out how we want to connect the properties. We talk about like Arbus is the mother, um not the mothership, just the mother, and then the properties are all siblings, they're all the family. If anybody, I think everybody knows somebody with siblings. There's usually like some, one might be really outgoing and one might be very artistic, one might be like hyper, into mathematics or sciences, and the other one might be a jock or whatever. All these different personalities, but you all know, you're like, okay, that's the Vogel family, or, the Wells family, or the Myers family. And there's that connective thing there, but it's not like, they're not like, hey, like, this is who our family is and this is what this is how we all behave. So that's been the fun experience of like trying to make sure that we're very protective of like what we would consider kind of micro brands of each of the hotels, and not while also finding the connective tissue. And to me, that's really comes down to this really big embrace of authenticity, experiences. And I think those are very broad terms, right? But I think, I think if you go to any of the properties, you walk in, that somebody deeply cared about how this was created, and the people that are working there deeply care about their particular property and who it is and how they come into that fold of it. It's especially apparent when it's very easy to see it when the properties are in the same market as each other, right around the corner, or, in the hub and spoke model kind of situation, where a cash house guest in Jackson Hole is very different than our Anvil guest. And they're literally in the same building. One's a hostel. It's more, approachable in price point. It attracts a very specific type of guest. It also attracts a very specific type of, employee that's guest facing, that wants to work in that space. And while at Anvil, it's a different price point, it's a different traveler that becomes more of their home base. And so we're like, okay, how do we make this someone's home base, but then really give them amazing recommendations and experiences that are not just a, whatever the other hotel down the street plugging, or some, tour that anybody can sign up on, Viator or whatever, any of those kind of online tour agencies. But like, going back to the cash house guests, they're usually there for one night. They are highly self-sufficient. They're very fun to talk to. They're probably coming out of the woods after camping for a number of days, like really in some cool spaces, being that, where those properties bump up to Teton National Park along with Yellowstone National Park. So you get that. And then in the winter, you have these skiers that are just hardcore. They're out the door very early and they're back early and they're ready to crash and knock out for the night. And then you get another, random kind of group. So it's a really, I think that's the fun part is recognizing all those things. And we're like, okay, how do we make sure if you're a guest staying at an Arbus property that you're not being inundated with this formula that would just like make no sense to each one of those properties, guests that are looking for something a little bit different at each one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good insight. We see so many properties at a really small scale that understand their guest and are creating these unique experiences. The team is aligned. And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the very sterile, robotic, consistent, scalable, probably profitable, and so trying to blend the uniqueness as well as the scale and the profitability is definitely a challenge, I think, for those of us in the space. And it seems like what you learned at Bunkhouse and kind of what you're implementing with your role at Arbus is kind of trying to blend those two and making sure that while it is super personalized and boutique, it is also something that can scale and can be profitable and repeatable. So I guess kind of with that thought, what are some of the challenges that you've seen and overcome?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think you took the words right out of my mouth, and a lot of the ways it's a lot has to do with the challenges really come around scale because you are asking folks to do usually wear more hats than they would in a bigger box hotel that has as I tell people usually when they sign up for any boutique experience and they're coming from a more larger organization, I'm like I've worked in those spaces. You get a playbook. They say, do not deviate from this playbook. And I'm like, your playbook is here. There's no pages in here. You write the playbook. You get this level of autonomy that is very special in my mind. But at the same time, it's a lot of responsibility and it's extra work. Straight, to completely honest, and obviously we're not saying we give them no direction, but again, to your point and to what we're talking about, we do need to, the check-in experience isn't going to be the same at the Ozarker as it is going to be for Cash House. It's going to need to be tweaked. It needs to feel different. We have different key counts. There's a different, a different approach on how you can engage. And can we're working on a project right now with 19 keys. We're going to be able to have a really high touch, long check-in experience that's going to engage and talk. But we can't do that with, frankly, after you get over 40 keys, 50 keys, and if you get up to 100, like Ozarker, you don't have that time because you multiply the math on, especially on a weekend high travel period of time. You're like, I need to get these people into these rooms because otherwise they're going to be upset with me that they're here waiting in line and hearing the same spiel over and over again. So I think that that's kind of, things that we've been working on, and what we're trying to do to combat that is work on an overall structured playbook. Kind of, as I said, there was no playbook, but there is one that we're working through. And the goal is that we'll say, okay, here's a really strong foundation for you at any property. You can take this and we say, okay, you need to have an orientation. And that orientation isn't just for your hotel, it's for your department because it's important as a housekeeper. What is my role in this organization? Every role is important to this business to be successful. So we need to make sure that they have an understanding of their connection. So it's like, but we need to tweak that, right? It needs to fit whichever market that or whatever asset it's going towards. Job descriptions, same deal. SOPs need to be tweaked. Again, same story, different room type needs to be approached a different way when it comes to the steps of cleaning and inspections and what needs to be in the room. So that's one of our goals is to help build more muscle memory in with people in the team so that it's more that we can plug and play the parts that are not the sexy bits of running a hotel or boutique space and be able to, whether it's at front desk or the kitchen or wherever it is, like how can we utilize efficiency and create a smoother process so that they're not bogged down in just working hard all the time, but they have moments of working smart, and freeing them up to be able to engage with guests more. And I think that that's really where we start to do that. And then it's also when we start to think about scalability with these things, and say if you're wanting to grow the platform, is recognizing again also that size of a property in the world that we're living in with post-COVID, as we were talking about a little earlier. The industry shifted massively. A lot of people left, and a lot of people that there was a lot of hiring freezes for a period of time. So that, that time I was talking to a friend, I remember a couple years after COVID, 2 years after COVID. And I was like, man, I can't find a good sales manager anywhere. And he was like, because all those sales managers that would have been sales managers now, they got frozen as a sales coordinator during COVID. There was no development, or that role was eliminated. That pipeline that was occurring disappeared or froze. And so you now have to fill this gap on a lot of positions. And I think also just with the workforce and the new generation entering, they have a different way of approaching how to learn and how to work. And it's meeting them where they're at. For so long, I was old man shouting at the sky, kind of like, why don't they understand this is, and it's not how we have to meet them where they're at and figure out how do we teach them and develop them and get them to a level where we're confident with their skill set. And then also, as a management company, how do we support them, like almost like flank them on both sides and say, okay, you're great with these couple things. I want to spend time developing you more on here. Let's say it's, operational efficiency. Like, all right, let's dig in there. Let's talk about that more, and let's figure that out. Who's another person I can connect them with on the team to say from another property or from the corporate team, and say, hey, will you kind of give them some guidance here? Or, again, kind of creating some guardrails to help them be successful. And then also realizing again that you don't have the giant mothership of Marriott with a group that could swoop in and do everything basically to have that, to solve these issues. And also that, kind of bopping around a little bit here, but I think like having a larger group come in like that, it pulls away from, you might solve some of your issues with that, these smaller boutique properties, but then you suck the life right out of it, and so it's this delicate balance of like, okay, how do we support as a management company and protect the team and provide them everything they need to do their job well? And then how do we make sure that we don't take away the secret sauce,
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of, I think that leads right into my next question. One thing that I always hear is a challenge, and maybe this isn't industry specific to hospitality, but I know just because that's the industry we're in, it's top of mind for a lot of folks, is who you're looking for, like what's an ideal candidate, how do they fit into the Arbus mentality spirit, that those things, skills side, what are you looking for, and how are you trying to solve for that?
Yeah, great question. I think to me, it's really a lot of it has to do with how curious the person is as a soft skill or a character attribute. And that can show up in a lot of ways, right? Someone that's interested in photography as a hobby, or they like to fix cars, or love to read books, whatever it is. I always like to ask, like, kind of like, what are you into? Like, what are the things that kind of make you really think on? Because that tells me a lot about a person, because to me, that's, usually those things, if you're curious and you're picking up things like this, it's because you want to learn and you want to figure something out, you want to problem solve. And I think curiosity naturally meets, when you're curious, you naturally meet people with a little level like of openness, more than I think people that are not as curious. And I think that creates a safer space in nature, just by nature of it, because I can say to you, Jeremy and Dustin, we've had plenty of conversation. I'm really curious on like what you do. Like, how do you create these experiences? Or like, how do you take a product that you may have only seen one time physically and then create a whole story to it, And I take that, and I think I apply that to when I'm talking to, whether it be a GM, and see how they think about that, as well as, a front desk agent as well. Like, what are you into? Tell me more about you. I want to know about you. And then I think the second part is empathy is critical. And I think that's where we've had a lot of success as like hiring in 2026 continues to be challenging to find the right people. But when I've shared the vision of Arbus, where it's really focused around responsibility, hospitality, community, and looking after each other, if you're in hospitality, you're usually pretty naturally an empathic individual. So I find that it attracts them almost immediately. And it gives me like, okay, I have an in now to talk to them more about it. And like, how does that empathy show up, and like how do they approach things? So for me, those are like the two most important things. If you don't have those parts, it misses a ripple effect on the other soft skills that you do need as a leader or just a team member.
What are like a couple questions or things you might look for? You mentioned curiosity, you mentioned empathy, but like, how do you, like, are there questions you can ask that kind of get to the root of that?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's, for me, the curiosity one is always first. I'm asking about what are their hobbies is the obvious one. But I think once you get into empathy is the interesting part. I picked this up from a colleague, and I was like, oh, it's such a great question. And I was like, what are your three adjectives your people that report into you how would they describe you? And that tells you a lot right away, because if it comes off a certain way, you're like, oh, this person, yeah, thinks very highly of themselves, and they're not thinking about. I asked the question, not what do you think about yourself? I want to know what your team thinks about you, about the people that have to deal with you on when you have a bad day, when you're having a crazy idea, the person that's, then on the days of like stability, providing that space. So that's one of my favorite questions to ask. And again, it's a very soft skill question. It's not like it helps me figure out who that personality type is, because then my follow-up is always is like, what is your leadership style? And I think a lot of times it's they might throw around the term servant leadership, which is very, buzzy word in hospitality space. And then I like to double click in and say, like, explain to me what does that mean to you? And if they can eloquently be able to describe to me how are they show up to their employee and their team and show up and treat them as what I like to call as like, or many people call as the internal guest. I don't get much time with hotel guests anymore because of my role. And I tell the managers often, you are my guest. My job is to look after you. So make sure that you have what you need to do your job. Make sure that you have you can call me at any time. You have my phone number. I will always call you back or text you. You can email me about anything. And my expectation is that you're doing the same thing for your employees that are reporting into you. Uh, and if if a leader doesn't have that approach it's just not going to work, because again, talking in the boutique space especially, you wear so many different hats. If you're a department, like higher up department head or GM, or sometimes you're a pseudo HR person, you're a pseudo therapist, you're a pseudo, um, sometimes in like a paternal or maternal way, this relationship that you create with the crew, and I always stay away from like, oh, we're just a big family. It's like, no, we're a team, we're crew, we work together, because I think it's important, because that can also get a little bit dicey when you start to go into those terminologies. It's um you quickly realize if you develop a nickname of some sort of, I was like Uncle Rob for some hotel employees as
That's
a
awesome.
running joke, and like then I was like, okay, I know what I am to them and how they look at me and how I need to make sure that I'm approaching them, and how would I do that? And that's obviously not to say that I'm going to be not holding people accountable. I think a good uncle or whatever would hold, be like, hey, dude, what are you doing? You're screwing up over there. This is, you need how to do your job. You've done it a million times. We've talked about this. Come on, let's get back on track. Um, but yeah, I think, that's a long way of saying, I think it's really, it's digging into like what type of leader they are and asking specifically, what do you, give me examples of how you do it, and how do you go in and show up. Also, to me, the other part of it is if they aren't in the trenches, with the team, and aren't able to, aren't willing to get down on their knees and look under a bed to make sure it's ready for a guest, or to, do the really, again, coming from housekeeping background, if a shower curtain's there, I pick up the shower curtain and I smell it because I want to make sure it's clean. If I don't have a GM that's coming in and is willing to do that stuff at the level that we want our boutiques to operate, they're never going to work out. You'll never get what you need out of them. That might go work at a bigger box where they have an executive committee and a housekeeping director and all these things where they're mostly behind a computer. I want somebody that's in the weeds. And in turn, you're going to get so much respect out of the housekeeper, that housekeeping manager, or that front desk agent, or that cook that you just sat there on the line watching them expedite.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Rob, pretend that I am a new hire. You have observed curiosity, you've observed empathy through the process, and say I'm on the front desk. What type of charge would you give to me to be able to take ownership, create a personalized experience for our guests? Like, what would you be saying to somebody in that new position?
Great question. I think I would say to them, I'd say, Dustin, welcome to the crew. First off, we're super excited to have you here because of who you are and, what we talked about in your interview, and what I want you to feel is comfortable hearing a guest talk about something. Maybe they're here for a special occasion, or maybe they're traveling alone and you want to do something nice for them, go for it. It's all okay to give a shot. Like, let's go through it. No, if there's time, I think the one rule I would tell you is we don't comp rooms without an approval from the GM. Otherwise, I trust you. Whatever you give away, no one's going to die. No one's going to, we are going to be okay. It will not put the business in ruins. So I want you to feel comfortable surprising a guest with something kind and a nice gesture. And and it can be as simple as a coffee, clocking what kind of coffee they liked from the morning before, or a special drink that they liked the morning before, to, checking in on them on, how their stay has been, but specifically if they were doing something, very, maybe they're on a work trip or something like that. Like, we can do so many things. We just want to kind of get you a beer when you get back tonight from your day. Or you love the hotel so much, why don't you grab a t-shirt on the way out? Take whatever one you want and have those moments. And if I come back to you and I say, hey, Dustin, you gave 15 shirts away today. I love you and I love this energy, but let's make it maybe 2 shirts a day, 1 shirt a day, and then mix in some of the other kind of lower cost items. I think that would be how I would approach. But I think it's very important, like, we've talked about this on, ops calls, like getting the team to feel comfortable giving something free, but not understanding that it's connected, and this experience that just added so much value. You giving me a free t-shirt or a baseball cap on my way out, oh my God, I am free advertising for you. Because not only, any good experience gives, I think they say that a person will talk about it to 5 different people, but now you've just upped your opportunities because I'm wearing a cool baseball cap that says Ozarker on it. People are like, oh, what's that? I'm like, oh my God, I have to tell you about this. This place rules. If you're coming to Branson, or even if you're not, you need to go to Branson and make this a little trip, like weekend getaway. You just up the ante so much. You don't even realize what you've just done for the guest and for the business. Oh.
What are some of the things you're looking ahead in the future of this industry, different trends, different things you're preparing for you personally or Arbus as a portfolio and a team of looking ahead at and excited about?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, the buzzword, and I'll add a lot of context to it, is AI. Obviously, is a big topic right now. My interest in it is really focused on kind of going back to what we talked about earlier of, I want the back of house experience to be as most efficient so that staff can focus on doing their job really well and engaging with guests. I don't have as much interest. I think it's going to go in 2 different ways. I think you'll find a lot of the like pod style hotels with the kiosks having more AI engagement where you know what you're signing up for. And then I think that there's going to be this continued want, and this is kind of the other part of it, is every report talks about millennial and Gen Z travelers being interested in highly experiential and authentic experiences. And I think if we are able to utilize AI over here to make things really smooth and easy to operate, we can focus on making sure that the guest experience feels really truly authentic, and we can create really unique experiences and make it feel a little bit more analog. I think people are going to be wanting, I know that I find myself, I can't stand seeing QR codes all over the place. I want to see, like, I want to hold something in my hand sometimes. I still like, I don't use an ebook. I read paperback. I like the feeling of a book. And I think that we're going to keep on doing that as all this technology is inundated into our lives. There's going to be this, you're already seeing it with like listening bars, things like that, vinyl coming back into the world. I think we'll just continue to see that like on steroids. And I think the last part I'll leave with is, as the industry, all these boutique groups getting acquired by the bigger groups, that pulls the authenticity away further and further. I'm watching it in real time. I'm not going to throw shade at any name of any groups, but I'm watching it and hearing about it. And a consumer's going to know that right away. They can sniff it a mile away. So there's going to be this demand that's left, but the actual amount of inventory isn't there. So there's I think, a great opportunity to be able to do that. I think the other part of it is trying to make sure we find, on the real estate side, people that are a little bit willing to take a little bit more risk and not bet on the Bonvoy points that you're going to get at this other hotel, and want to create something special. Yeah, that's where I think I see the industry going. And that's where I know that I'm really trying to push our team, is AI in the back, analog in the front.
Well said. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think that this will be a really great episode. People will get a lot out of, and it's always just fun to talk shop and hear from you. And so I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And thank you both for thinking of me. This was definitely super fun, and look forward to having these conversations in real life next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, how can people find out about Arbus?
So as of right now, we're still kind of building out our online presence, but you can definitely check out the hotels specifically, such as the Ozarker, Anvil Hotel, Cash House, Alpine House, Turpin Meadow Ranch, the Parker Hotel, and soon to come in a couple months, we'll officially launch our website and kind of online presence.
And in the meantime, I'm sure people can reach out via LinkedIn to you, and if they,
yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool.
DM me. I'm pretty active on there, and love to just chat and meet new people. So please.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rob, for being on the podcast conversation.
Yeah, thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.